So today I'm joined by Malcolm Clarke. Malcolm is the Managing Director of Baxall Construction, a main contractor and project manager for high quality residential, schools, commercial, industrial and hotel construction projects throughout London and the South East. So welcome, Malcolm.
Morning.
Morning. So Malcolm, tell us a little bit more about Baxall Construction and what you do.
A pleasure. So as a company, we're actually coming up to our 60th year next year, celebrating what we're sort of terming a bit of a, as opposed to being 60 years old, it's 60 years young and looking to the future. But it was originally a family business set up, as I say, 60 years ago. That it evolved into the business that we now have, but it's kept maintained very much a family values a feel to it. There aren't any members of the original family involved. I worked with two of the sons of the original founders for over 30 years, but we did an employee ownership trust transfer 3 years ago now, which has been highly successful and been a great advocacy of what the business was set out to do, to have that strong values, really good teamwork, concern not only for customers, supply chain, but very importantly the people in the business. And that's now continuing in a very positive way. But yeah, no, we're growing. Our business plan is to grow at 20-25% a year. We're not quite achieving that at the moment. The last few years have been pretty tough for a lot of people, and it's sort of tended to flatline. But we've kept very positive about where we're heading, and in fact continue to recruit and build our resources to deliver what is now an increasing pipeline. And actually, I just did the forward for our staff newsletter yesterday that went out, and I made the comment that we've got ourselves into a very strong position, and excitingly so, for the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah, massive challenges, but that's what we're in business. Yeah, we're in construction. That's always tough, but also our business model is different. It has changed, and how we deliver for our customers has changed. But yeah, that's a long introduction to what we're about. But,
that's great. No, thank you for that, Malcolm. And we'll pick up on some of the things that you've mentioned there, because I'd like to sort of explore those in a bit more detail. But before we do, you're the managing director of Baxall Construction. So what do you see the key roles of a managing director being, Malcolm?
Yeah, leadership, fundamentally. Like most of us, especially as a business is growing, you start doing everything. You got your hat on in running projects at one time, and actually out, you'd see me out on site times. At the same time, I then sort of evolved into the managing director role. But I think that as a business grows, it becomes even more important that the leadership understanding and how that is transferred into support and strategic thinking is absolutely fundamental to the success of that business. I mean, I'm sure you know, the majority of businesses that fail is because they haven't understood that, and they've invariably got a great idea, great background and training, but actually they don't understand the leadership and the strategic element of it that is just so fundamental to a successful business.
Yeah, completely agree. So, and you mentioned there about challenges. What do you find most challenging about your role as a managing director?
It's the people bit. I think that you can be incredibly knowledgeable about technical aspects, and you can be really clever. You can come up with innovation. You can think of all sorts of things, and it's really important that you're doing all of those. But actually, the biggest challenge is people.
Yeah.
And that's not just your employees, that's the people that work in your supply chain, and it's the clients that you work with, and it's how you establish a set of values that support that. But yeah, I spend a large proportion of my time recruiting and supporting developing my team to deliver to the highest level.
Yeah, it's again, it is all about the team. You know, a business is made up of people, and it's the people that contribute to the success of that business. I think it was something I read by Stephen Bartlett recently, who said, no matter what industry you're in the recruitment industry. Because it is all about recruiting the right people. So, let's because I know that this is something that you're very passionate about in terms of you know, the people in your business, and you mentioned the employee ownership trust that you've sort of set up earlier. So you set up 3 years ago, but you're very focused on developing or recruiting the right people and then developing them. So
Yeah.
tell us a bit more about that, Malcolm.
Yeah, where does this all come from? And it's that understanding, how do you build top level teams, and you can bring people in at high level, and you can use all sorts of sporting analogies of buying in players and so on. But fundamentally, that works for a while. But the way that you sustain a really strong team and a really strong business is by continually improving, continually developing, and bringing people in, as we call it in the Baxall Academy, and developing their skill set. So in a lot of cases, it's very young. We've got people coming in from school, T level, A level levels, and then others join us after university. But that creates a really healthy structure where the business can grow with opportunity for the youngsters to develop, and also for people within the structure to develop themselves. So we have a very strong appraisal, personal development plan piece. That it's one of the reasons why we're platinum investors in people. But more fundamentally, it creates such a positive feel. The opportunities are about what people make them. We have this thing about you can't be promoted to the next level until you've trained the person that's succeeding you.
Like it.
And when you think about it, because it's no good everyone being the managing director, not that they want to be anyway, but it's that you can't keep pushing people up the if you haven't got people doing the work, and that creates opportunity. But it's also a really healthy atmosphere. It's not one of, well, I better promote them, or better pay them a bit more money, or we'll recruit someone in from outside. That because that's what we need. Actually, let's think ahead of that. Let's plan. Let's be proactive in looking at where we see our market going, where we see opportunity, and then being prepared for it rather than being reactive, being proactive.
Okay, and so you've got, am I right in saying that, how many employees actually have you got at the moment, roughly, Malcolm?
Yeah, I think we're just under the 100, 98, I think it's the last.
98. So pushing 100 employees. So yeah, I can understand, you know, why it's so important, the you know, the employee engagement and continued learning and development. But what qualities do you look for in employees?
It's commitment and passion.
Mm-hmm.
You get a certain amount from their qualifications and their education, and quite rightly so, because that indicates their commitment to learning and developing. Because one of the strongest things that you could do, and I would give this advice to youngsters, is, you know, knowledge is power. You know, listen, read, learn, podcast, whatever. Mm-hmm. The more you know, the more that you will be of value, both to your colleagues but to the business. But that's very key to that selection process.
Mhm.
The passion bit is quite an interesting one. You see, particularly when you get youngsters coming through and they haven't really sort of got into the world of work, and you're trying to identify whether they're going to be any good. Are they going to get up in the morning and deliver? Are you actually going to be able to convert them into being work ready? Because unfortunately, a lot of youngsters, they don't teach them how to go to work at school. And so you just have to have that feel that they've done or able to do that. So the ones that have demonstrated that in even the smallest way always get the better hearing, if that makes sense. The ones that have got up in the morning and done a paper, not that you do paper rounds anymore, but
We're showing our age there, Malcolm.
yeah, no, exactly. Gone to McDonald's and done their, work there, or worked in a pub, or whatever it is. We've gone and done charity work at the start. I had a very interesting one just recently where a young man who got his degree was struggling to find a job in what he wanted. He got a master's, an incredibly intelligent guy. And he came and saw me for a bit of career advice. And I said, "What are you doing?" And I had actually found out what he was doing. And he was literally working for an estates department for a private school that we were just finishing a school project on.
Right.
And he's digging post holes and laying concrete paths. This is a 25-year-old, postgraduate. And I said to him, "Look, you just got to be a bit broader in your approach and thinking about what you can do. Just get out there and do it." I said, "You're doing it. So what impresses me is that you're not just sitting at home moping. You've got out there and you're digging holes and laying concrete paths." I actually gave him an opportunity that he went and spoke to someone that I knew who had had a similar upbringing. They'd started as a bricklayer in their early days. And then but very, very intelligent guy. He now is running a very successful IT business that's developing massively, and they're developing new products around carbon and the like. Cut long story short, he went and had an interview with them. He saw the potential in this guy, and he got a job offer yesterday and starts on the 8th of January.
Fantastic.
And that, I think, probably epitomises the right route and what we look for and what I look for and what I think every business should be looking for is that bit of extra, that bit of special, that they're prepared to put themselves out and do something different.
Yeah. Okay. So it's that phrase that I've sort of heard before, which is higher on attitude, not necessarily on aptitude. Okay, yeah, aptitude is important if you want them to have certain skills to do a job, but the most important thing is attitude to, as you say, that's demonstrated through how they've pushed themselves and how they've motivated themselves to do what they're doing. Okay, great. So, Malcolm, you mentioned earlier about actually how values are very important to your organization. And before we came on today, I was looking at the values of Baxall. Well, first of all, actually the culture that you've got. So the culture, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is customer satisfaction and continuous improvements are the essence of Baxall's culture. So tell us a little bit more about that first, about how you came up with that as being the culture and how you ensure that culture is lived and breathed through Baxall.
Well, I think we've been running that for a long time now. I mean, decades, but it's evolving continually. We now sort of tag it by calling it hashtag doing it differently. And I think if you're anything that you're doing, particularly in business, if you just keep doing the same old thing, all you'll do is get the same old result. Now, there is a case of saying, well, if you're being really successful, just keep doing it because you don't want to change it. But then someone else will come in with a better idea, with a better thought process, better people, whatever it might be. and then all of a sudden you're now behind. And it's the same in sport. It's the same in life in general. So that sort of feeling of we can do better is there. Lessons learned is massive. Understanding best practice, and then one of the things that we've evolved around that continuous improvement value is around us setting the best practice. We some years ago said, look, we wanted to be the best of the best, and it almost felt a bit arrogant saying that. But what's happened in recent years, the last decade or so, is that other people say that about us, and that's the best thing that you could have. That you get to the point where the people really value what you're delivering. And one of the things around the values is that everybody has values. If they haven't, then they're not really selling much. But they have to happen, and it ticks boxes. But one thing that we really are keen and work really hard on is living those values.
Yeah.
And it's one of the feedbacks that we get through the appraisal process. I mean, all of the appraisals are around understanding how those values work and how we all individually and collectively contribute to that, and how we can set goals for next year and the year after and so on. But what's interesting, and I get it, I mean, the feedback I get, a client comes and says to me at a shooting day we had a few weeks ago, and they turned around and said, just so impressed with your guys. We're doing a college in Rochester, and he was saying that what's really, really, really impressive is that they just follow your values. They just, and it's so consistent. And when you get that fed back and your customer is telling you, you're getting something right, but it's also self-perpetuating because the guys themselves don't, the whole team don't want to be the one that doesn't make it clear that they're working to those values. Don't want to be slightly out of kilter. They want to be the best, and that's exciting when it's like that.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with what you say. That the important thing with values is that they're not just things that are put on the wall, and that's all they are.
We have got them on the wall, by the way. We have got nice plaques.
Putting the wall on the wall and visible is great.
Yeah.
But it can't stop there. So to give you an example, I don't know whether you've ever seen the Netflix slide deck, which came out a number of years ago, and it talks about values and culture. But it's got a very interesting slide on there where it refers to this, and it shows that, I think it was the company Enron, and it shows that, and it gives a number of their values, which are honesty, integrity, these type of things. And then the next slide is a number of their senior team being escorted out by the FBI in handcuffs because they weren't living the values that they had up on the wall. So yeah, values are, it's not just about having the values on a piece of paper or on your website and saying these are our values. It's about making sure that everybody lives them. And the demonstration of that in what you said is that you got that feedback from one of your customers without necessarily prompting it.
No problem.
They said, we can see that your team are living your values. So
exactly, and it's so important that doesn't get lost. And one of the risks, I mean, we do strategy sessions with the staff every 4 months, and that feeds into our strategy board and our thinking going forward. But one of the concerns that get raised from time to time is, how do we, as we grow, continue to maintain the values? How do we make sure that we don't lose that fantastic feel that the business has, and the reason why it's being so successful? And that's great, because I mean, half the problem with these things is actually understanding what the potential risk is. If you understand that, then you can mitigate that. So we've upped our communication around all of that piece. We've got different people doing various elements demonstrating it, youngsters coming up through doing presentations at staff meetings about their understanding of the Baxall value. We work, sometimes it's a bit sort of under the radar a bit, but every time someone comes in, they go, wow, that's another example of why Baxalls are different. And that encourages, as one of the reasons, I mean, you mentioned recruitment. How do you recruit people? It's because people want to come and join you. It's not because you pay them more necessarily. You might get a few people, but you actually are trying to create an environment where people want to come and work for you. And once you've done that, then you've not cracked it completely, but you're definitely down the right road.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And look, that's interesting because I think because you've mentioned two things there. The values are what make your clients want to work for you, also work with you, because it makes you different.
Yes.
Okay? Which then also means that you don't necessarily always compete on price.
Well, that's an interesting conundrum, because the danger is that you price yourself out of the market because you are you're pricing too high or whatever. But actually, what we've recognised and now are demonstrating is actually our prices are less, they're better, because the way to improve profitability at the same time as delivering value to your customers is to improve your efficiency. Not cut your supply chain prices, not come up with a clever idea that changes the specification, God forbid. And
look, and I think that's an absolutely great point, because values improve productivity and efficiency. When I was saying you don't necessarily compete on price, what I meant is that you continually discount just to win an opportunity.
No, correct.
People actually look at you and say, if you are, let's say you're exactly the same price as your competitors, that actually you're ahead of them because of your values.
Yes.
You stand out because of your values. You don't have to discount your price just to be cheaper than your competitors to win it.
No. There's a really good publication that's been done by the Construction Leadership Council, which is government supported, about delivering value, and it's called the Construction Playbook. We've now converted that into the Baxall Playbook, but fundamentally it's a whole range of areas that give you value, and price is part of it, but it's things like social value and your environmental credentials, your support of staff, and as you say, general values. And when you start to put that into place, you don't necessarily have to be the cheapest. Most of us that buy things, we don't always buy the cheapest. In fact, as long as we're not being ripped off, we'll go for the thing that actually ticks all the boxes. And that's what we're doing as a business. Unfortunately, the construction sector has a awful malaise around racing to the bottom and the cheapest price, and it is because of the value. You're spending £1 million, and someone comes in with a price of 950,000. The £50,000 is a big lump, but actually, in the overall time, if that ends up being 1.1 million because they've got it wrong, and then all of a sudden that 50,000 was nothing compared to the increase. So
look, price is important. You're absolutely right, but value is the most important. And you're right in what you say. I think there's been some research on this where on average, I think it's something like 10% of people will buy the cheapest. Then you've got something like 70% of people will buy the mid price, the best value. And then you've got about 20% of people that will buy the most expensive because they believe the most expensive is the best.
Have they got a list of those people? Which ones it was? We do know some of them, I might add. But
but it's the same. When you think about it, like looking at a wine list.
Absolutely.
If different people look at a wine list, some people will go for the cheapest. Some people will, the majority of people will go for the best value, and some people will go for the most expensive because they believe the most expensive is the best. So it's the same across that. And look, the other point that you made there, which I just want to highlight, which I think is really important, is that it's very much an employees market at the moment. Employees can pick and choose who they want to work for. Okay, so your point of difference, your values, makes you stand out and makes people want to work for you. And again, it's not all about you. You mentioned this earlier. It's not all about paying the highest sort of wage. Yes, you've got to be in the ballpark of paying the right wage. But then it's the other thing that your business offers its employees, the things that you've mentioned earlier about you know, the environment, about the culture, about personal development and progress. That's what people look for.
Inclusivity as well.
Yeah.
When some of the people that have joined us, particularly from the larger organisations, whether they're coming from the design side of things or from the contracting side, their biggest surprise and delight is around the fact that they're engaged and they're included in those strategic discussions, those innovation thoughts, and they've been listened to.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference. I mean, my recruitment consultant, who's worked with me now for over 15 years, and comes to all our interviews, and it's quite different to the majority of recruitment type agencies.
Yeah.
I mean, he says, I really don't have a problem finding people who want to come and work for you. So my issue is whether they're good enough.
Yeah.
Which is a nice place to be.
And that's because you've attracted that certain type of employee that fits with your organisation. So look, Malcolm, there's one question that I always like to wrap up these interviews with, which is, what is the best advice you would give an 18-year-old you?
I mentioned it earlier about knowledge and understanding, and I do just think, you know, it's right from day one, but as your career develops, your understanding of what's going on out there, your ability to read and listen to articles, just understand what's happening in the world in general, gives you a depth that other people don't necessarily have. And the other thing is don't give up.
Yeah.
You know, it's a tough world out there. It's a tough world in all sorts of ways, but whether it's personal and your mental health and the other bits, or whether it's your career or your ambition, is if you give up, then what have you done? All that you've done previously is just wasted, and it's about maintaining that focus. And it gets tough, and you can't be on top of it all the time, but just don't give up.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. I like that, Malcolm. Thank you very much for sharing that. So Malcolm, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.